back, my friends. Welcome to the Enabled Podcast. I'm so excited to be with you again this evening or this morning or this afternoon, whenever you're listening to it. So very thankful for tuning in. Thank you for that. Thank you for all those who tuned in from back home in North Carolina, the greatest state in America. And thank you for those who tuned in here in Santa Clara, California, those who encouraged me, sent me positive texts, passed me in the hallway and said the podcast was great. Whether you were being sincere or not, I appreciate your words of encouragement, my friend. They encouraged me, certainly. They encouraged me enough for me to come in here and make another one, hobble up the steps, to sit here, bored out of my mind, trying to figure out what to do first. And now that I figured it out, I'm finally doing the third episode. Thank you for those who tuned in to the past two. I do not take it for granted. I'm going to give you a simple thought. I don't know how long this one's going to go, but I'm working on the timing. I realized that the first video was 26 minutes long and the second was 6 minutes long. 20-minute difference, but that's okay. You want to know why? Because I'm learning, okay? But with that being said, I'm going to be in Luke chapter number 10. Luke chapter number 10, and I'm going to start in verse 30. This is the parable of the Samaritan. And as many know who studied this passage or heard this passage preach, I know we heard it preached in chapel actually 2 times in the past 2 weeks, actually, by 2 different preachers. Amazing. But this was put on my heart a while back, and I was trying to find the scripture to kind of the scripture I was looking for, and I couldn't really remember it. So I finally searched on Blue Letter Bible, and this popped up with a few others. But this is the parable of a good Samaritan, the Samaritan. And the Samaritan in this story, as many know, is Jesus Christ. And the Levites and the priests, they represent and they symbolize the religious groups. I'm going to start reading verse number 30. And Jesus answering said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. Amen to that. And he went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him in an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3, thinkest thou, was neighbor unto him, and fell among the thieves? And he said, he that showed mercy on him. That said Jesus unto him, go and do thou likewise. Hopefully if you're not asleep by now, because I know that me reading on a podcast is kind of boring. Trust me, I feel the same way. Luckily, when I actually preach from a pulpit, I'm not that boring, but I probably mess up a whole lot more. Anyway, I was trying to focus so I'm not stumbling and rumbling and rambling all over my words. But we see in this story, we see a Samaritan. We see a Samaritan, obviously, like I just said, that represents Jesus. And then we see a Levite, and we see a priest, those who are supposed to be those religious leaders in the community. The religious leaders, those represent the ones that we would say the contemporary movement, those leaders. Those represents the Catholics, and those represent the Methodists, all those that we see in North Carolina and any other states you're listening from. Those represent the religious leaders. You see, they passed by this man who had been beaten, who had been ripped of his raiment, who had been wounded. And they passed by him, they looked on him, and even the Levite, he looked on him, and then he passed by on the other side. Now, this is literally a simple thought. There are so many things you could bring from this, but my simple thought is how, simple question, simple thought provoking statement. How do we treat those who can do nothing for us? How do we treat those who can do nothing for us? As I was reading this story for the first time, I believe I read this in my devotional maybe, I want to say a month ago. And before I left North Carolina, it's kind of funny that I read this a few days later. And it really convicted me. But I was in North Carolina one afternoon, and we were working, and I worked electrical contractor for TK Electrical. This is a sponsorship for TK Electrical in Rural Hall, North Carolina. No, I'm joking. But yes, great electrical company. But one day I was working, and we were working in this shopping center on the north side of Winston-Salem, where I'm from. And the break came, so we said we're going to go and we're going to eat at McDonald's. At McDonald's, I love that place. But we said we're going to go eat at McDonald's, and we're going to enjoy a meal for our lunch break, and we're going to go back, and then we're going to continue working. So we went for our lunch break, and we had about 30 minutes, really. And we were trying to go quickly. We ate inside, everything, all the works. Well, I remember as I was going out, and like I said, this is the north side of Winston-Salem, so there's a large homeless population there. And I was walking out, there was a homeless man, and I already could kind of see in his eyes as he was walking towards me and two of my other coworkers. Actually, my pastor's son was with me. He worked at TK Electrical for a short while this summer, and he was with me. And then I had another coworker that I'd been working with for a few weeks rather. And he came up to me. I just knew he was going to ask something. Well, it was a black homeless man. He had rugged clothes on. He definitely did not look the part. He looked the part of a homeless man, but nothing else. And I remember him walking up to us, and he asked, "Do you guys have any money for food? Do you guys have any money so I can get myself something to eat?" And I can tell he probably hadn't taken a shower for days, and he was rugged. His hair was matted up, and I remember looking at that man. This is not brag. It's going to sound braggadocious. That's a big word. That's a word Pastor Trieber would use. Braggadocious. Okay. This is going to sound braggadocious or like I'm bragging, but I'm really not. But I remember my heart was kind of convicted, and I tried to do better with handing out tracts, and I tried to do better with treating others right, and I always try to do better at treating others nicely. I know I joke a lot, but I try to treat others nicely, especially those who really have no reason. You have no reason to treat nicely in the world sides, at least. And I remember he asked us, and obviously the other two, they're like, they kind of shrugged it off like, nah. But I said, yeah, go with me. I told them, I said, go back to the job site. I'll be back. And we're about at 30 minutes anyway. So I said, I'm going to go. And I said, yeah, I got you. So I got my card out of my pocket, and I walked him in and asked his name. And I feel kind of bad about it. I don't remember his name. But I asked him his name, and I told him my name, and I said, "Hey, my name is Jonté," and da-da-da. He said, and I said, "Yeah, I'm a Christian and everything, and I'm glad I came across you. I'm glad I could help you out." He didn't really say much the entire time, and I was kind of wondering why. I was like, I'm thinking in my head, dude, I'm getting you food. You could at least, say you could at least say thank you or something. But as I'm getting, going in, we go order, and it just seemed like he had not been in that situation before. And I was kind of wondering because, normally a homeless man, he knows how to order in fast food restaurants and everything because he eats food at, obviously he eats food at these places. So I said, well, yeah, we're not going to order. He kind of stood at the counter. I said, we don't have to order at the counter, man. You got the screen right here, and I'm going to get you what you want. And I stood at the screen, and he just seemed uncomfortable. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't really know why, but he just seemed different. So I said, hey, I'm going to, order this food for you. I said, what do you want? And I remember him I remember like it was yesterday. He got a Big Mac meal with large fries, a large drink, and a side of 10-piece chicken nuggets. So I remember the meal came out to like $15, and I was just thinking in my head, goodness, you can take it easy on me, man. But I just remember him just telling me what to order, and as I was ordering this, he was just looking at me weirdly. I was trying to look at him in his eye, like we're taught in school, like in speech class, and look at him in his eye when you're speaking to him, use his name. So I was using his name. Hey man, what do you want? Da 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 da. And he was just looking at me in a weird way, and he kept shaking his head, and I was just like, he wasn't really answering. And I remember after I ordered the food and I got the receipt, I said, hey, is everything all right? And he looked at me in my eye, and I won't forget this as long as I live. He looked at me in my eye and he said, people don't treat me this nicely, ever. He said, people don't treat me this nicely, ever. And I remember being so convicted by that. And I mean, I refuse to say, we were in the Bible Belt. I refuse to say that I didn't ask him, but I refuse to say that man had never came up across a Christian before. I refuse to say it. My fear is that he had passed a bunch of Christians before. He had been on the sidewalk. He had been in the middle of the road. He had held up a sign before. He had been on a corner, and he had passed a bunch of Christians. This wasn't California, my friend. This was Winston-Salem, North Carolina. This was in the middle of the Bible Belt. And my fear is that he sat multiple times on the corner and he asked for food, and he had been begging for food. And don't get me wrong, I don't know this. I'm not going to judge a man's motive. Okay, that's a bad thing to do. Don't try to judge a motive. I learned that from my pastor this past year. Don't try to judge a man's motive. I don't know if could he have had a BMW sitting around a corner? Yes, he could have. Could he have had a perfectly good home in an upscale part of Winston-Salem? Yes, he could have. Could he have had better clothes? Yes, he could have. Could he have taken a shower? Yes, he could have. Could he have been able to go get a haircut right afterwards? Yes, he could have. Could he have taken, if we would have gave him money, would he have taken it and he would have went to the ABC store around the corner, the alcohol store, and bought something? Yes, he could have. But my fear is that he could have sat on that corner for years and years, and Christians could have passed him. And what we do as Christians a lot of times is we look right by him. We say, well, don't make eye contact, don't make eye contact. Trust me, I know, I've been there before. Don't make eye contact with them. Don't roll your window down, roll your window up when you pass them. Just try to ignore it. We are so quickly to judge the priest and the Levite in this story. But before you do that, realize how many homeless people you pass on a daily basis. How many people you pass that can do nothing for you at all. How many people who don't fit the bill, who don't dress it, who don't dress the part, don't look the part. Just imagine all the people you pass, no matter where you are. And I remember where I was, I would go on this parkway, and known as University Parkway in Winston-Salem, and a bunch of homeless people there. They hold up signs and they come up to you, they pander. But I'm afraid more oftentimes than not, I've treated them badly. And not even intentionally, but I've treated them badly, and I haven't treated them most kindly. And you don't have to say something rude to treat someone badly. You can just walk right by them without even acknowledging them. They didn't even acknowledge this man. The Good Samaritan was the only one that acknowledged this man. We are called to be Christians. We're called to be Christians, so we're supposed to be Christ-like. Well, you want to know what Christ was like? You just look at the Good Samaritan. Look at the Samaritan. It didn't say he was good, but by the end of the story, he sure was good. He was an outcast. He had been beaten. He had been wounded. But you see, the Good Samaritan came by. And you know, something as simple as buying a homeless man a meal can make such a difference. Such a difference. And my fear is more oftentimes than not, so often that a lot of Christians go past these people that can do nothing for us, can go past the homeless, can go past the orphans, can go past the widows. Those that can do nothing at all for us. And we pass them by without even acknowledging them. I was so convicted by that. And I remember him, and he didn't have tears in his eyes, but I got to be honest, as I was walking away, I had tears in mine. As I was walking back across the parking lot. But when he said that, nobody ever treats me like this. Nobody's ever treated me like this before. I was so convicted. So convicted. And really, if I could give this a title, I would name this But a Good Samaritan. But a Good Samaritan. I'm not comparing myself to Jesus by any means. I can come short. I will come short. I'm not comparing myself to Jesus, but when I think about the story of the Good Samaritan, I think of that, and I get convicted every time, because I remember that man who didn't look the part, and I remember that man who was hungry and he ate the food. At least I doubt that he threw it away after I gave it to him. When I left, I handed him a Bible tract, and I said, I want you to know that I'm ashamed to say I didn't ask him if he was saved or not, but I handed him a Bible tract, and I said, I want you to know there are people that care about you out here. And I said, I want you to read that. And I gave him a tract, and obviously it had the plan of salvation on the back of it. I said, I want you to read that when you get a chance. He said, you have a good day. He said, thank you. And I never forget how his eyes looked. And it bothers me that I can't remember his name, because I looked him dead in his eyes when he told me, nobody ever treats me this way. Nobody ever treats me this good. The simple thought today is, think about those you come across. And my friend, this doesn't have to be a homeless man or a widow or orphan. This could be one of your classmates. This could be one of your coworkers, one of your neighbors that you pass by constantly, because they can do nothing for you. The best thing you can do for someone is point them to Christ and treat them with the love that Christ treated you. And I'm thankful that Christ one day came by my side, and he healed up my wounds, and he patched me up, and he sent me along my way. And I'm thankful for that. And he sent me, and he gave someone over and put someone over me, like the innkeeper, put someone over me to take care of me like a pastor. And I'm thankful for that. But Christ doesn't just leave us. He stays with you. If you're a child of his, he always is by your side. He never leaves you nor forsakes you. And I'm thankful for that. He's sticketh closer than a brother. Now, I want you to think about that. How are you treating those that can do nothing for you but a certain Samaritan? This is all for today's episode. I want you to hope this helped you in some way. If it did, please let me know if it helped you in some way. I like to know these things, and whether, you can reach me on social media. Most of you, 9 times out of 10, if you came across this episode, you know my social media. But if you don't, it's just search up my name I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube, the Enabled Podcasts now, Spotify, Apple. You're more likely listen to one of those. But yes, please let me know if this helped you. But a certain Samaritan. Thank you. Have a God blessed day. Stay tuned for another episode of The Enabled.